So I think the most amazing thing that brings all of us here together on this panel, that brings so many people into this room, so many responses to this piece, and individuals joining us around the country and possibly around the world through video stream, is the fact that we're all extremely committed to the continuation of the Jewish community and the value that our Jewishness has the ability to offer to our community, to Jews, and to those around us as well. When I read the Pew Report 2 years ago, I came to a very different conclusion, I feel, than some of my panelists. I thought it showed the opportunity that we have ahead of us. It showed the progress that we as a community have made. So how do I get there? In my office, I have 3 pictures. They're really all pages from magazines. The first one comes from 1946. I'm sure my co-panelists know exactly what it is. The title, The Vanishing American Jew, had 4 main subpoints below it: an increase in interfaith marriage, which I believe at the time was pegged at around 17%, the rate at which children of interfaith marriage were not going to be identifying as Jews, they predicted that rate at 70%, low birth rates, and essentially the increasing of the Jewish middle would be the language that we would call it today. The Jewish communal joke goes that 10 years later, Look magazine, which published it, was out of business, and we as the Jewish community are still here. The other 2 covers, one is entitled The Me, Me, Me Generation, and the other is called The Me Decade. And I enjoy when my students in statistics come to my office to have a TA session, they look at those and they go, why are those on your wall? And I challenge them to understand the difference. The Me, Me, Me Generation was published 2 years ago in Time magazine. The Me Decade was published in the early 1970s by New York Magazine, talking about the baby boomers. Now, on the surface, we could look that there's a challenge at a generational level, but the lesson that you'll take from Jonathan Sarna's class is that we always need to look at history to understand the present and understand the future. And the lesson that I take from those 2 covers is that potentially it's not a generational challenge, but a state of maturation, where they are in their life cycle. So as I looked at Pew, I wanted to take the step back and not just look at this moment in time and what Pew was telling us, but put it, as Jonathan did, in a historical context, looking at some previous studies. So I mentioned in 1946, we thought that 70% of the children of intermarriage would no longer be Jewish when they grew up and self-identified. Pew, in my mind, was earth-shattering in the revelation. 60% of millennial children of interfaith marriage are now identifying as Jewish. They're split. 50% are identifying as Jews by religion, so the first question Pew asked in the Jewish section is, what is your religion, if any? And another 30%, when followed up, who had said nothing, that they're atheist or agnostic, said, I consider myself Jewish in some other way. This completely changes the assumptions that we as a Jewish community have been operating under for over 60 years. So we look at some of the other findings that we have through Pew. We see that the rates of fertility, the rates of marriage are lower than maybe we would like as a community, but those rates also haven't really changed substantially historically through the last 20 or so years. So I see some consistency in terms of where we are right now. We see other metrics that were identified potentially as challenges to our community, which is the increasing middle, which we do see some of that happening, but there are also measures that continue to show consistency. In 1990, 1/3 of American Jewish households were synagogue members, and that number continues today. We have a similar number of individuals fasting on Yom Kippur and going to Shabbat services as we did in 1990. Compared to 2000, identification and one's connection with Israel has increased, potentially due to some of the Israel trips that the piece encourages more of. So while there are signs potentially of concern, and I think we can always do more as a Jewish community, there are many signs that we are doing extremely well. In research, we often talk about the counterfactual. It's the idea of what would have happened had we not had interventions. Now, it's often extremely hard, if not impossible, to measure. We will never, in this case, be able to understand exactly what the situation would look like had we not had interventions like the 1983 reform movement, recognition of paternal lineage, like other initiatives to engage interfaith families. But what we have seen is that our predictions, even as recently as 2005, when 2 of the lead authors Stephen Bain and Jack Wertheimer wrote in the foreword that the minority of Jewish children of interfaith marriage would identify as Jews. We've recognized that some of these assumptions we as a community have been working under are not the case anymore. And so as I read this piece, I realized that we have a lot more that we can do, but that in the time we have been here, and since some of these past studies have come out, we have made substantial changes that are impacting the direction that we're in. And so to conclude, the 74 signatories of the piece, as has been mentioned by several people on the panel, is an amazing breadth of the American Jewish community. But at the same time, I want everyone to realize that it is 74 co-signers. Since the original piece came out, we have had over 20 formal responses in E-Jewish Philanthropy and other sources. And then about 2 weeks ago, one came out from the Jewish social justice movement, co-signed by, I think it was 52 leaders in the American Jewish community. So one of the challenges I often gave myself when I saw the initial list is it can be extremely overwhelming seeing all their names. So I took a step back and I thought of 5 individuals in my life who could potentially have been asked to join as co-signers. And then I went into the list of co-signers to see if they were there. And one of the things you'll notice is that there's an amazingly impressive list of individuals on that list. But there are also a lot of people who most likely were asked to join, but instead chose not to. And so with that, I'm looking forward to a really exciting and lively discussion, because we are all here essentially at the end of the day for the exact same reasons, to make sure that there's a strong Jewish community for generations to come. Thank you.